Hello, this is the Rugged Angel Cast, and I'm your host, Camila. Welcome to the podcast that focuses on conversations with women who have a story to tell. This week, I'm talking with multidisciplinary artist and cultural worker Sara Tang. We discuss her experiences as a member of the Not White Collective and how joining the group helped to give her a sense of belonging. As an artist, Sara works hard to promote racial equity in the arts, believing that we can heal our world through cultural exchange and education. On a continuous journey of self-discovery, Sara focuses on the importance of community, authentic connections, and storytelling in healing and creating change. In this episode, you will learn all about Sara and her unique artistic process that involves using coffee, but not just as fuel. So let's meet Rugged Angel number 130, Sara Tang. Sara Tang, welcome to the Rugged Angel Cast.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is a great little project that I am working on with you ladies of the Not White Collective. And, you and I just kind of mentioned beforehand, before I hit record, that, this is a good time for us to get to know you all individually. And, so this to see who all makes up the collective.
Yeah, really exciting. I was invited by Christian to consider joining them, which floored me at the time. I was not part of the original crew.
Okay.
I was Maritza Mosquera's guest artist at the inaugural exhibition.
Okay.
So each of the Not White sisters asked a fellow Not White artist to be their kind of like little guest with them for the show.
Oh, cool.
And Maritza asked me, which floored me because I didn't consider myself an artist at the time.
Interesting.
I considered myself somebody who was trying to find my way, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been many years since then, but I always say to people, the ladies of the Not White Collective have really saved my life in so many ways. They
Really
have believed in me. They've encouraged me. They've helped me to feel human, to feel worthy, valuable, and like, wow, to know my worth,
That is a commonality. That's a common thread that I'm hearing in a lot of your stories.
Yeah.
Particularly the fact that a lot of you did not consider yourselves an artist, quote unquote, prior to being asked to join the collective.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me. What were you, you didn't consider yourself an artist, but what were you doing at the time that Maritza invited you to come along?
So my whole life, since I picked up a pen as a little kid, I've always been drawing. And, I was even a published book illustrator when Maritza asked me to be her studio assistant. But I didn't think, I considered an aspiring illustrator to be one thing. I think the title of artist was a little more serious to me. Because I consider there's makers, there's crafters, there's this and that, and it was definitely not something I considered myself. I made very tiny little drawings that I posted on social media that were basically my way of expressing my own personal mental health healing journeys. So they were basically little pen and ink drawings. And Maritza said to me, she said, "Hey, this work is really strong. I would like you to be my guest." And I was like, whoa, because the drawings were pretty tiny. And so I buckled up, found some frames, tried to describe them. And it was absolutely flooring for me. That exhibition happened at the Brew House down on the South Side.
Okay.
And I remember going through that exhibition. I want to say it was back in 2018, perhaps. And I remember going through with my parents, and my father is from Thailand, my mother is from Pittsburgh, and all three of us went through that entire exhibition reading about the Not White Collective, reading all these different things from each of the artists and just being like, wow, we related to it so much. It was kind of this moment of grounding, like, wow, these are my people. Especially as somebody who has felt alienated for most of my life in Pittsburgh. So, yeah, it was a really powerful moment.
Yeah, so you're originally from Pittsburgh?
I was born here, yes.
Was there any point where you moved out and came back, or have you just always lived here?
Yes. So, my parents moved away for school for my dad. He then taught youth programs for 4-H, which is kind of like different programming for kids in the country and other folks in the country with different stuff relating to farming. So we moved to State College, Northern Maine, potato field country, right up. We could walk to Canada. Tiny little town of 3,000 people. And then we moved down to central eastern PA, so essentially Amish country.
Wow.
And then, and then a lot of things happened that led my family to move into my grandmother's house when she died back in Pittsburgh, the same house my mother grew up in.
Oh,
so
man.
That was during high school. So I moved around a lot.
Yeah.
I was in like 6 different kindergartens, 4 different high schools. It was a whole thing.
I mean, in a sense, that can be, some could find that disruptive, but also I think it kind of speaks to who you kind of, I guess, and I don't want to speak for you, but you just you start to kind of just really depend upon yourself more so. Is that what your experience was like?
I think this is true of everyone. I think we all try to follow where the love is, and at different developmental stages in life, that can look like different things. I was also homeschooled for a period of time because we moved around so much. And I would say like the homeschooling community I met are still my core group of friends, but it's also led to a lot of deconstruction in my own life because a lot of the people I met tended to be very radical religious people. So
yeah, I think that's something that comes through a lot in the homeschooling community.
For sure.
A lot of people, I think that's the majority of the homeschooling community. Like the reasons why certain parents choose to homeschool, I think a lot of it has to do with religion. But then there's the other ones. It's like, we just move around a lot. I just need to do this.
Yeah, it was kind of unique because I grew up religious, like going to church every week with my folks. But it's also a mixed faith household situation. So my father's not Christian. He's not baptized. He's Buddhist. But it was a very positive gift to grow up in a mixed faith household where it was deeply understood that all people were good. We're all finding truth, So that was my perspective. And I think the older I get, the more I see all the different kaleidoscope of experiences that people have from their nuclear foundations of reality. So, yeah.
So you had mentioned that you kind of felt alienated here in Pittsburgh. Was there any particular thing why? What was that feeling?
So I think I've always prided myself in, well, not always, but I guess, I think I was a pretty likable teenager. A lot of the schools I started in out in Harrisburg, people were very welcoming towards me and inclusive towards me, even though I was very strange because I hadn't grown up in a regular school. So I might have worn my clothes differently. I didn't know the rules of the classroom, so to speak. But everyone was very kind to me. Moving out to Pittsburgh was a lot of a culture shock for both me and my sister. So my mother and father live in the South Hills right off of Route 51. And in recent years, it's become a very diverse place with a lot of people moving there, refugees and different folks and immigrants from all over, specifically a lot of folks from Bhutan, the Bhutanese and Nepalese communities, with whom I actually recently worked with for an exhibition. And I told the girls who were doing traditional Bhutanese and Nepalese dances, I said, you're going to the same high school that I was terrified at, and to see you thriving and celebrating your culture and integrating and holding all these realities is really healing for me to witness.
Wow.
As an adult. I didn't feel like I had that opportunity. I know it probably sounds a little weird, but I think because now it's kind of strange growing up in a mixed racial household as well, because there's a lot of different things that yeah, I'm trying to think how to even describe it, but the racism was much more overt, I guess, when I moved to Pittsburgh in the high schools I went to, in that I was the only minority, which is kind of funny because in a lot of circles I move in now, I'm more the white one, I guess you could. It's all a construct. It's all very strange how we dance around all these strange constructs that make up the culture. But yeah, I think it was pretty hard. There was one foreign exchange student from his name was Tommy, and he was from I actually don't even know what Asian country he was from, because I wasn't close to him, and he was learning English. And I remember people telling me, you need to go to prom with him, just kind of into the same category, things like that. And what's wrong with your eyes, and
wow.
Things like that. So
what year and what are you in high school? That kind of question doesn't even the eyes, that makes zero sense to me. As to why someone would have the gall to ask that.
I don't know. Yeah. So I graduated from high school in 2006. Yeah. So Pittsburgh,
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even last year I had an older man. I'm sure this happens to lots of people of color on the weekly, but this older white man walked up to me when I was working in the service industry and started speaking to me in some kind of a sing-song weird way that I could not understand, gibberish basically. And I was like, excuse me, because my assumption at that point was, oh, maybe he's an immigrant. And I was trying to figure out what language it was actually, because I'm usually pretty good at figuring out where people are from. And I was like, excuse me, I'm sorry, what did you say? And he said, isn't that how you people talk? And I was just like, what? I was in so much shock, you know, because
I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah,
that is,
but it's just these are the microaggressions or macro that people experience a lot. And I think I've grown in so much confidence since then, but I would say that before I met the Not White Collective, it was very alienating. And it was just a very dysphoric experience looking in the mirror and being like, oh gosh, I'm not like other humans, the other humans I saw around me. And, I still actually feel that to a certain extent when I go out to my parents' neighborhood, because, they're out kind of more in the outskirts. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's like all old white people. And even my father, he's had people yell at him, go back to your country, go back to China, when he's trying to take his walk,
Yeah.
So
it's disgusting. And it really, it hurts my feelings to know that this is still something that's going around, and this is something that I also, obviously as a Black woman deal with on a regular basis. And you mentioned being raised in a mixed race household. My husband is white. My daughter is, mixed race, obviously. And so there's just things that I am conscious of a lot, because she kind of presents as white. And so there are things that those two I feel like can get away with when they're walking around in the neighborhood. Like, you know, sometimes he'll let her walk on, you know, strangers' lawns, like, you know, that we don't, neighbors that we don't know. And that I feel like I'm a little more uptight about that. It's like, I can't let her do that, you know, when we're out walking, because, you know, it's just next thing you know, I'm hearing, you know, some darky and her, you know, nanny and her charge, you know, like letting the kid that she watch, you know, like stuff like that. That's so, it's all, I'm very much aware of that in my own mind, but also it kind of troubles me in hopes that I'm educating her, but not putting fear into her. And it's this delicate balance.
It is. Absolutely. Yeah. I can't even begin to imagine.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you found the collective, or the collective found you and welcomed you with open arms as an artist. And at that point, you know, that it wasn't until then that you were like, okay, I'm an artist. And what you do is, from what I can tell, from what I'm seeing on your website, is it's some amazing work. A lot of just mixed media and beautiful drawings and paintings. And you're a multidisciplinary artist and a cultural worker. So because of, you know, what I've seen is that you do a lot of work to promote racial equity in the arts. This is true. And this was like stemmed from your own personal experiences.
With the Not White Collective, yeah. I think this is also going to sound a little strange, but I think because the homeschool curriculum we used growing up was antiquated, a lot of the books that I learned off of were written by old white men from like the beginning of the 20th century. And there were a lot of deeply systemic, like racist things that I wasn't even aware of how deeply it had been instilled in me through my education. And I think like kind of unraveling that, and I'm still unraveling that on the daily. I think it's also, when we do this work, at least for me, it's also doing that work in myself. And for instance, I never grew up with Asian community. Meeting Asian community here in Pittsburgh was so powerful for me. It was the first time I ate certain types of authentic Asian food. My father would cook growing up, and I would always eat his food, but he cooks sort of like a Chinese Thai mashup a lot. And I never had like authentic, say, like Szechuan or Cantonese food, or you know, authentic ramen, you know. So it was just like really powerful. And then to kind of just even see like all these different little cultural things that you have in common with other folks with their Asian sides of their family, and all of these different interweavings. It's something I'm passionate about because it relates so deeply to understanding our well-being, and I think honestly healing our world. I think, like, as far as an activist goes, I don't feel like I'm quite as, I guess it is a form of activism, but I feel like when I think of an activist, I think of the really hardcore, courageous people who are out there really advocating on so many levels with the government and all these different things about what to do. I feel like I'm a little more programming based in how I think about these, helping with these issues, I guess, is why I think culture worker makes a little more sense than activist from where I stand. But yeah. So I'm in an Asian American collective too called Jaded that was founded a few years ago.
Yeah, I was just about to get to
that. In the wake of the shootings that happened down in Georgia, I think there was some kind of like crack, like the ice breaking, so to speak, because I think it gets thrown around a lot that Asians are like the model minority, and like we kind of like play to what white people want, you know, a lot of the time.
Gotcha.
And I think especially in Asian communities where there's growing awareness of all of these systemic issues that we all need to work on together for group liberation, I think there's always like this kind of attitude of like, well, we don't have it quite as bad. Like, so we shouldn't be talking about this. And I'm also part of the digital content curation for Anthropology of Motherhood, which Fran Flaherty founded. And after that happened, we had this, I think it was still like when everything was mostly virtual. And we had an AAPI healing panel conversation with a lot of local people. And I think specifically for Asian women with the sexual exotification relationship of how the US has exploited a lot of Asian countries, a lot of Asian cultures. And then it doesn't get talked about so much as overtly in history books, I think, in the same way as like other other issues that are placed as like, you know, this is very good and evil type of a thing. It's very much, well, we had to do this. Like, I'm even amazed, like, at I was like shocked at how many of my white friends were still like defending what the US did to Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Like, oh yeah, we had to do that. And I was like, excuse me?
Wow.
I think that might be a good segue too, to say, I think this isn't everyone's path and charism, but I think for me, because I feel like I often bridge these liminal spaces with a lot of different communities, some of which are unaware and ignorant of a lot of deep problems. I think my natural way of dealing with those things is to feed seeds when I can. And I know that like bringing all the truth out there sometimes over the head is not going to actually work to change minds and hearts with that knowledge. And I think like it takes time, and I'm an example of that. It takes time to learn. And I think that's also why I'm not like necessarily appearing to be as radical leftist on a lot of my front facing sort of work, because I'm still friends. I still speak with a lot of people who are unaware of a lot of these issues. And even with my mother the other day, and she's a white woman and I love her to death, but you know, I've had to have many conversations with her like this is systemic. This isn't all of us. And we need to have conversations. It's one conversation at a time. I know she's a loving woman. And to say like, hey, where are you coming from when you say, why is that man sitting out there in the car waiting? If he was a white man, you would not be thinking.
Right.
And I think some of her ways of wanting to protect me as somebody who's not white has been interesting growing up. Like, don't wear that. It makes you look too Asian. Or, oh, that's good because that person doesn't see you as Asian, meaning maybe you'll be more protected, which felt like an insult a lot of the times. But now I'm kind of like, maybe she was trying to protect me because she herself didn't feel protected, even as a white woman growing up, because she was Italian. So it's weird. And like we would be driving through Appalachia, you know, on family trips, and my sister is a little more white passing than I am. And she would tell me and my dad, like, I want you to wait in the car. It's not safe here for you to go in here. You know, things like that. And I would feel it.
I like, there's this quote on your website. It says, Sarah's process about your drawing. Sarah's process is mindful of drawing people into a deeper empathic encounter with themselves, their communities, and what is strange and beautiful about humanity and existence. What do you mean by that? Like you're drawing people in a deeper empathic encounter with themselves.
So I've always drawn, and you know, in English, you know, drawing something or drawing people in, drawing things in, the word draw has two different meanings: the act of physically drawing, and then the act of invitation, hospitality, inviting people in, inspiring them in to something deeper, something that they want to come into, that's something that they have agency to come forward into. And I grew up at a time where I think mental health was starting to become a more common public conversation. When I was getting older, I talked to a lot of my Gen Z and Gen Alpha friends, and I say, hey, it wasn't always like this. You know,
Right.
like, yeah. And even in my own family, like with mental health struggles, it's like, oh, you just need to snap out of it, you know?
Yeah.
And I always intuitively knew that there were deep stories within each individual that if only they believed they were worth it, that would come out, you know? And I really believe in the phrase, people begin to thrive when they feel truly cared for. And I think when I do programming like workshops and different things, I have a storytelling workshop for the AAPI community coming up this Saturday. It's very much about you as a human are of value, and it's not about, it's deconstructing the capitalist mindset of you have to be doing, you have to be fit this model of success or this mode of like the American dream that is unsustainable, and honestly dehumanizing, and is ableist. You know, all these fights and struggles for human liberation are so deeply interwoven, it's impossible to extricate them because they're all tied into each other. So
Right.
with that in mind, I think that will always be a part of my work, no matter where the future takes me, whether that be through, you know, having a visual art piece, doing spoken word poetry, doing a workshop, you know, that will always be a part of where my motivation comes from.
Yeah, you have, there's a lot of aspects to your art and to your work. How do you find yourself how do you find the ability to keep it all straight there, to like just kind of like to focus to
Well, weekly therapy helps for accountability for myself. It's a challenge. I feel grateful for the things that haven't worked for me in the past, because I feel like they give me a better heart to help people know that it's okay to make mistakes. I feel like I'm one of those people who wears my heart on my sleeve for the purpose of letting people know they don't need to be ashamed. And being like, hey, this is something you don't need to be worried about. Like, hey, this is common. You're not alone. I know for my own healing journey, knowing you're not alone and having community is the way to healing and the way to heal forward. And in a time in our country where I think, due to many factors, it's increasingly become more and more polarized, more and more of all these little sound boxes where everyone's just repeating the same things back and forth to each other. It's dividing. It's like almost like this divide and conquer thing where people are just becoming more and more separated, in terms of like talking about different issues and how it might look on, say, something like social media. But I think one of the best weapons we have against that, if I can reclaim weapons as something that can be more of like a tool as opposed to something to enact violence, is to gather in person, have authentic community, do the bonding, you know, do all those things. So that's like so powerful.
Yeah, I believe this technology has really given the human race a disservice. You know, even like we're supposed to be able to just be more connected, but it's not in the sense of, you know, you're on social media, but you follow the people who you want to follow. And so there are more than likely, it's going to be a bunch of other like-minded individuals, and you're just kind of like yelling into an echo chamber. And it's just, you know, it's not, and you know, just even from texting as opposed to making a phone call, or you know, it's really disheartening as to how like we aren't really connected as much as we would think we are.
Yeah, I think people use busyness as a distraction a lot of the times. And in a culture that rewards people for being busy, being
for hustling and always doing the grinding and all
stuff.
that.
Yeah, get your 15 minutes of fame, this or that. I think that's deeply interwoven to so many things, including all this rise in like burnout culture, that pits people thinking they're individually part of the problem when it's actually these deep systemic problems,
Yeah.
Even with like environmental justice, it's like if all of us reduce, reuse, recycled, it still doesn't change the fact that like something like 5 major corporations in the world produce like 70% of the gas emissions, It's just like, like distracting from the big problems,
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that's another aspect of your artwork too. You're also into like the reuse, recycle, as to the point where you incorporate coffee. You're drinking the coffee left over from your morning cup into your artwork. How did that come to be?
It was kind of an accident. I was like, and I've always loved the color brown because it's the color of earth and horses. I was a horse girl growing up. I was just like, yeah, brown, And the brown bottom of my cup, I was, painting with watercolors, and I was like, oh, let me dip my, brush in there and put on, and it was like, it was just so magical because it was like watercolors, but it was also very different. It was like, wow, this is kind of like acrylics and watercolors. And then I started adding other things to the coffee. So my family dyed Ukrainian eggs, like Pizanski eggs, growing up for Easter time.
Oh.
The dyes aged after many years and won't bond to the eggs anymore. I've been using a lot of those leftover dyes that we have in all these old mason jars to do a lot of paintings and just seeing what happens. I never do anything the same way twice. Something a college friend noticed about me when we were writing papers every week. She was like, you never write a paper the same way. I was like, whoa, other people have a method? And I was like, I'm exhausting myself. But
it's like, maybe I need to figure out how to streamline this better.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of funny, but I think in growing awareness with a lot of my friends in the queer and neurodivergent community, they're all coming to me like, Sarah, you're neurodivergent and all these other different things. I'm like, what? I think regardless of how we talk about those things, I think it's really great to find what energizes you. It's really great to keep exploring your entire life, figuring out what works for you. And I just know life is so much bigger than capitalist society, American society, with this like white hierarchy and this hustle, get all these properties so you don't like lack for something that other people who are poor already have, which is love, which is community, which is like a sense of social security. There's all these different ways that we can think about and measure like quality of life. And yes, there's a lot of things that we need to change. And hope is a powerful tool. That's something I've also been trying to lean into more. I got like 10 books out of the library on burnout culture like half a year ago. It was really ironic. I was just like reading about all this stuff and I was just like, wow. So, I'm always very public too about my journeys, but reorganizing my email is a very practical side of how I can figure it all out. Again, weekly therapy, so I can be like, wait, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong?
At what point did you decide to start therapy? Like when? Because I have.
That was also a massively deep part of my healing journey. That happened. But probably back in my like early 20s. So like, so I've been in therapy for a very long time. I'm 36. And I tell a lot of my friends, you work on different things with different therapists. So I think in the beginning, I was like, I'm doing everything right, supposedly, in my life. Why am I so unhappy? So that's why I went to therapy at first, because most of my friend groups and social groups were super religious, super Catholic. Everyone was getting married and having kids. And I was like, here I am all alone. I think a lot of it, I'm going to say a forbidden thing, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was in white spaces and I wasn't seen as a romantic option.
Yeah.
And I think I got away with a lot of like more like drag queer sorts of things in the community because I was already an other. So it was like, oh, that's just Sarah. Like she's the weird one. She's the this one, that one.
Right.
Through many years of deconstructing and figuring things out, trying things, learning my own innate goodness did not stem from whether or not I obeyed a religious set of rules, you know, because that didn't come from my parents. That came from the communities I was exposed to.
Okay.
I learned that I had a PTSD diagnosis, and that was a really big moment for me. I think a lot of people have complex PTSD who don't realize it, because my association at the time was war veterans, you know, and I didn't necessarily have all the classic symptoms of like, you know, constant nightmares and paranoia and things like that. Well, I guess I did have some paranoia, but like, it made me feel like I was less crazy. It made me feel like there's a reason for why my world's upside down. And it was related to these extreme religious circles I was exposed to. And that's actually something I am excited about working on in the future, is developing a series of workshops on post-religious trauma syndrome and post-cult trauma syndrome. So
Interesting.
that's something I've been talking to folks about for many, many years. A lot of my friends, I think that's how I first actually became acquainted with folks in the trans and queer communities, is that there's a lot of overlap. I really appreciate the name of your podcast, like Rugged Angel. I'm kind of like, that's so cool, but it's also so freaking Pittsburgh, you know, like.
Well, it's funny because the story behind it is when I was in school, when I was in art school, the guy I was dating at the time, he needed help with a project or something, and I helped him out, and he was like, "Oh my God, you know, thank you so much. You're an angel." And at that point, that was in my real tomboy phase in my life. I was like, you know, really rejecting anything girly. And so I was like, I'm no angel, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, well, fine. You're a rugged angel. And so that's where that comes from.
I love that. And I relate because I was a tomboy. I hated that my name Sarah means princess. I was like, I hate pink. I hate girly stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it's like you can be a freaking warrior princess if you want, you know?
Exactly. Yes. I mean,
right.
Yes, exactly. I was like rejecting all of the pink and like all of like any like silky type, anything like that, you know, in my whole little like skater punk phase and all that business. But, you know, and I don't think I even wore like women's jeans until I was probably like, you know, 25 or something like that. I was always wearing dudes pants. But I finally embraced the dress, the skirt, the femininity that I do, that I possess.
I love it.
And I am okay with that. There are two sides to this coin. I am all right with that.
Yeah, I love that. I'm also thinking like, I mean, I know we don't know each other too well yet, but like, I just feel like there's got to be so much that we have in common by the very nature of the fact that you wanted to start, you know, a podcast, because ultimately you're just curious about people. You want to share their stories, you know?
Exactly. And I think, and you're right, there is something that there are a lot of things that I think we have in common in that aspect, because I love telling stories, like whether they be mine or someone else's. And I like the idea of getting to know people, and I like getting to know the why.
I find stories to be healing. Like stories are a deep part of my mental health healing journey and also the collaborations I do with others, because I think we are a storytelling species, and ultimately it
Yeah.
heals people. Like so my good friend Nicole Gallagher and I during COVID started this like storytelling slam kind of based off of like the Moth model. And we
Yeah.
would meet every 3 weeks. It was virtual at first, and we'd have a different theme every time. And then it became in person, and we're still going. And it was just like one of the most life-changing moments to go into a space, not knowing what you're going to hear, not knowing what people were going to share.
Yeah.
And to know that this is not something that's being recorded. It's not something that's ever going to be repeated. This is like a special moment here in time where what they're sharing, those stories live on in us too, the hearers of those stories. And
Yeah.
just a really beautiful, like primal experience too with other humans.
Yeah, that's something else that we're starting to lose a little bit in this culture. A lot of us getting the stories from our elders,
Yeah.
and there's not a lot of that happening that I can tell. I know it wasn't a lot happening in my family. Like I would get, a couple stories here and there, but there's also such a disconnect in my extended family that you're not really getting a lot of stories from people firsthand. And that's something that I think we're going to miss, and even just like the handwritten recipe of something of a family dish, something that your great grandma used to fix all the time, that kind of thing. And I don't know, I would like to find a place or a way to get back to that. And
That's so interesting. You phrased all those thoughts relating to that way, because it's reminding me of the prompts I have for this weekend's storytelling thing. So I'm collaborating with Tyler Fan, PhD. He's somebody I would love to introduce you to at some point, but
yeah.
he runs Abolition Coffee and Abolition Books on the edge of the Strip District. It's just a coffee
Oh,
shop
okay.
/ book shop. He also has a critical Dharma reading series. He's an acupuncturist, and he's also the first professor of Asian American Studies course at Pitt, if you can
Really?
believe that.
Wow.
But we're collabing on this, and we decided to call it Dreams from the Orchid Den because my Thai side of my family has an orchid farm in Thailand, and his Vietnamese family, his father has sort of a man cave up in Erie in his house, and it's like all dark and man cave like, but then it's just filled with orchids, and
Oh,
he
wow.
recites poetry in the dark, and I was just like, this is too
Oh,
good.
that's beautiful.
And one of the prompts that we have that you're reminding me of is like, and this relates specifically to Asian families, but I think it relates to all families, is what is forbidden in your family? What do people not talk about?
Yeah.
Who instills that who instills some of those unspoken rules? Who enforces them? Who challenges them?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great prompt.
I joke with people when I haven't seen them in a while, when I'm getting together with friends. I'm like, share all your gossip. Give me the spicy tea. And it's really funny because it's like, I'm not looking for things that put other people down. I'm looking for
Right.
I'm looking for those spicy stories, And a lot of times I find those in history books, like all of the spicy Pittsburgh history that does not get talked about. I'm just like,
Yeah.
this needs to get talked about. We need to talk about this, Like Pittsburgh had a mayor back in the 19th century who got quote unquote accidentally decapitated by a train down on the north side, and
What?
he was a really unhappy
I'm
guy. But yeah, he hates
I'm sorry, but there's no accidental decapitation by a train. Like,
what.
there's no way. Like, did he just fall asleep on a railroad track? Like, that's no.
Yeah. And then the grave in Allegheny Cemetery where the guy died of radium poisoning. And it's like they exhumed his coffin. He was put in a lead coffin. And they exhumed it in the 1960s, and it was still hot from all of the radiation.
Shit.
Back when they
Wow.
thought radium was like a good thing for you. And then his jaw fell off and was like,
Wow. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, those are the types of the spice. That's the spice I'm looking for. Pittsburgh, so classy, always. All right, so
Yes.
We'll have to eventually meet up in person and take this offline and try to share some spice back and forth. But we're going to bring this to a close, this episode, and I will ask you, what is the one thing you'll be disappointed if you never get to experience?
I love that question. Wow. I was just thinking about this the other day. I was like, if I died now, I'd be really happy.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah, I think I would like to experience being a mom. I don't know if it's in the cards or not, but I think having a kid of my own would be really lovely.
Right on. It is something. It is. That's absolutely,
and I'm okay if it doesn't happen,
roller coaster. Yeah, and that's good.
Yeah.
That's good that you're kind of have it, both ways. You're kind of riding that wave. But yeah, it is a trip. I tell you that. It is a roller coaster full of peaks and valleys and all sorts of stuff, especially when you end up with a daughter who reflects all of your sarcastic ways right back to you. That's
mini me, right?
Yep. I never realized how I didn't realize, 5-year-olds could be sarcastic. I mean, you haven't really lived enough on this earth.
That's amazing. I love that.
Talk about spice. She is spicy. This one is like, this one goes to 11. Like I fucking love it. Like I can't, I'm excited to see like what she does and who she becomes in this world, but it's also like, I just need you to do what I'm asking you to do.
I love that.
Just need you to fucking eat the broccoli. That's all. That's all I'm asking. So, Sarah, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I'm happy to have gotten to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, I'd love to get to know you better sometime too. I felt like I was
absolutely.
Talking, but yeah.
Well, this is about you. But yes, we will absolutely get something on the books, and maybe we can meet at the Abolition Coffee and Books place,
awesome.
because I've never been there, and it sounds like a fun place.
It's a nice little spot, yeah.
Oh, and where can people find you online? Website, your artwork?
Oh yeah,
socials.
So I would say my socials are going to have probably more up-to-date updates than my website. So my social on Instagram is my name, Sara Tang. So Sara, and then Tang, like the drink is what I tell people so that they know. The gross astronaut drink, so Sara Tang, no H. And then _ draw me in. That idea, once again, of physically drawing, but also drawing in community. Draw me in. Although some people look at it and they're like, is that Dramamine? And I'm like, I need Dramamine, but And then my website is drawmein.com, but it's dashes between the draw, the me, and the in. So draw-me-in.com.
Right on.
Thanks so much.
Hey you, thanks for listening to the Rugged Angel Cast. This podcast was produced, hosted, and edited by Camila Adams, also known as Rugged Angel Productions. Please subscribe, rate, and share the show. It really helps with visibility. Take care.